Hi, David Reynolds of Clear Freight here to give a little chat about how culture and cultural nuances can impact your business favorably or unfavorably. My fortuitous circumstances were to grow up overseas due to my father's occupation, such that I grew up in Zaire, Germany, Switzerland, the Philippines, Hong Kong, and had a very enriching experience growing up there, as well as traveling for Clear Freight for 33 years, setting up our agent networks and our overseas contacts. Key thing about international business and with anything is to make sure that you have some humor and that you have fun. One key thing I think is to be self-deprecating, not only for oneself but for the country. It's always a good icebreaker for Americans to have some jokes about America, and that's pretty easily done. One thing to understand about the world, just like the United States, is that every country, every region, every city, every little location is different. Thinking about the US, we can see that how we approach the markets of Seattle or Miami are quite different. Likewise, with Northern California and Southern California, or even within the city of Los Angeles and Orange County, how the attitudes and values are different. The same exists whether it's Germany, China, India. There can be no general assumptions about a country and its people because every place is different. The people of Sharjah, for example, in UAE are just 20 minutes down the road from Dubai and a completely different world than Dubai. The same exists everywhere. In Germany, you can go from one village to the next and not even understand the dialect. So it's key to remember that every little area of the world that you might be dealing with is quite different. Um, we see that the world is ubiquitous in terms of product. Uh, Certainly, you can get anything anywhere, but culturally, there are a lot of differences. And what I'd like to share with everyone is some of the experiences that I have, and also the importance of having the ability to have empathy and care for your potential buyer or your potential supplier, but mostly buyers overseas, so that you're able to relate to them at their level. One of the stories that I find most interesting about adapting one's business to the local culture is an example that many of you may know from before in the 1970s, as I date myself, is the experience of General Motors. They had this idea of selling the Chevy Nova in South America. And they were all about ready to go. Their marketing people, their sales, everything was ready to launch the Chevy Nova in South American countries. And lo and behold, of course, Chevy Nova, I'm not sure that they had any Spanish speaking people in their marketing department at the time, but Nova is no go. So this is something that is a big do not, in terms of not understanding the language. And of course, we're very lucky that English is the business language of the world, and that we are fortunate to have it that way because, as you saw, the people of General Motors back in the 70s were going to sell a no-go car in South America. There's many other examples, and where you see great adaptation to the local business tastes is, for example, McDonald's. McDonald's sells spaghetti in the Philippines. And likewise, you see in India, you see Burger King and McDonald's, et cetera, selling mutton burgers instead of 100% Angus beef. You have to adapt. You have to understand the cultural nuances that are in the market that you're trying to sell in. And of course, as I conclude later on, the best way to do that is to visit these places. Another story I'd like to share of what not to do, but sometimes it's inadvertent. And it's something that I did once. And, in one of my business travels to India, I was well aware of how sacred the cow is. And I respect that. And I think it's awesome. In fact, I thought it was so unique on one trip in the city that on one day I saw a cow that was actually holding up a whole intersection, creating the biggest traffic jam that you could ever imagine as everybody waited for the cow to do what the cow was going to do to get out of the way. And it didn't get out of the way. And there I was in this little van, and I stood up with my camera and was about ready to take a picture when my business colleagues sat me down. And I wasn't being disrespectful, at least I didn't think I was. I was just thinking it was so unique and awesome that, this cow had so much power. And the taking the picture was more for me and not as any insult. But I didn't really show the cultural sensitivity, and it wasn't on purpose, it was inadvertent, but it just shows that you have to be very aware and sensitive as much as possible to the culture that you're selling to. Uh, I remember also back in my days in getting to see the 1974 Ali Foreman fight when I was living there. George Foreman came to Kinshasa, and of course Muhammad Ali was the great citizen of the world, and everybody loved him in Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo. And George Foreman was not so well liked. And I don't think that really the people of Zaire at the time knew who he was. But what he did was so unknowing. He came to Kinshasa with his German Shepherd as his pet. And little did he know that this created people really disliking him even more, because German Shepherds were used for control before 1960 by the Belgian colonists. And here he was with a German Shepherd. So that really did not help him in any way. And of course, we all know of the Ali Boumbaye, Ali Killam, that came thereafter. So critical to be, able to relate and to understand the history, the traditions, the values, the attitudes of the people that you're selling to. And, you can read, you can learn, you can understand, you can do the research, you can do a lot of things, but ultimately, the key is to visit. The key is to get in front of people of the country that you're going to do business with, so that you can see eye to eye with them what is going on in their country. Seeing is believing. Zoom and the technology of Zoom is great. And, I know that a lot of the pandemic and COVID is going to hinder people's travel even for some time more. But the moment that you can do it safely, I suggest you make this investment. It could be the biggest investment of your life, as opposed to trying to see if you can trust people and create a relationship through emails, screens, etc. I don't believe that it's possible to do it as well. My experiences overseas have been picking agents that Clear Freight works with by virtue of going and visiting every country that we work with, and making sure that our collect freight is going to be collected and paid. And I'm not going to be able to do that over emails or a Zoom or anything but a visit to see everything that I can see in that country, in that city, in that region, to protect Clear Freight's interests. Um, the values and attitudes of countries are different. In certain countries, the ethics are different. And basically, I remember many times in the 90s telling our foreign agents, please do not use the word kickback. We do not like that word. Kickback is not used. Please use the word commission. And so that is one key thing. And one thing that I do have to say is that, in terms of ethics, corruption is everywhere, and it exists everywhere and always has. It's good for the individual, bad for society. And what I think is true, and what I've seen, is that in the developing world, in some countries, there's a lot of corruption. Let's say it's 80-20 corruption to normalcy. In the United States, first world Europe, Western Europe, Asia, first world Asia, et cetera, it's the opposite. It's 80% normalcy, maybe 20% corruption, whereby that 20% corruption in the first world dwarfs in dollars or euros or yen the corruption amount of the 80% in value of the developing world. So who's more corrupt? Yes, our systems work because there's less, but certainly there's a lot. And if anybody wants to share, if anybody wants me to share more stories of corruption in the U.S. with customs inspectors and et cetera that I've experienced, I'd be more than happy to share that. But so it's really important to understand that what happens in other countries and in terms of their laws, in terms of their values, et cetera, is one thing, and that we have to be always mindful as Americans never to break US law. But when you're in another country, it's the laws of that country that dictate what happens. And a lot of times it may be upsetting. I know that I've been at places where I saw the payments happen, but I'm not going to say anything. It's not my country, it's not my place. But I think there has to be an awareness that every place is different in terms of those types of ethics. Um, Clear Freight can give you all the landed cost analysis, and we can get in all to the details of how to negotiate letters of credit, and people will be learning all of these things from all of the experts in terms of selling and in terms of all the details of business. But sometimes it's just empathy and just relating and really caring and getting to know your customer on a personal level, which takes time, which takes travel and takes that investment. And when that investment makes sense, and when the pandemic is, if and when the pandemic and COVID is over, it's very critical to make that investment so that you are doing the right thing in that country in terms of your representation of yourself and your understanding of where they are. Clear Freight is here for you. We do a lot of value-added services in terms of the transportation, the door-to-door logistics, but certainly a lot more other value-added things that can help you in making your deals happen overseas. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.